welcome back! Today we're continuing our discussion of Monkey, which is the abridgment and translation by Arthur Waley of the much longer Journey to the West by Wu Cheng'an.
Sun Wukong!
When we last left our heroes, we had Kuan Yin, who was traveling to China to find a scripture seeker. We had the Monkey King, who was still trapped under a mountain. We had the young Sun Sung, who had saved his parents from a horrible fate and was learning Buddhism in a monastery. What's going to happen next?
And now for something completely different.
Once again, we completely push them to the side and introduce a whole new set of characters, and follow a different thread for a while, but don't worry, all the parts will be coming together here pretty soon. At this point in our discussion, I wanted to pause and talk about the folk characteristics of this novel. Folk stories and folk tales are a fascinating and vital part of culture. And in fact, the study of folk tales can be a really interesting way of studying the values and ideals of a culture, as well as the way they develop over time. Plus, it's fun hearing great stories. Now, a folk story is a story that's been passed down through a culture orally. The characters and situations within the story tend to be larger than life. Hyperbolic exaggerations. You'll frequently see animal and supernatural characters interacting with the human world as if it were just everyday life. But folktales, by the nature of being told over and over again, tend to carry their culture on their back. They reflect certain ways of thinking and ways of doing things within a culture. A lot of times they're passed down from parents to children, but they can be transmitted in other ways. And sometimes a folk story will be carried from one place to another. And in so doing, it will transform and change. Folk stories don't have an explicit author, because they are told anonymously and as part of our storytelling culture. However, over time, sometimes a folktale can be written down. Wu Cheng'an, the author of Journey to the West, was fascinated with monster stories and stories of heroes within his culture. So he took this folk story that was already an important part of his culture and had been for hundreds of years, and he set it down in this classic work of literature. Interestingly, in China at the time that Wu Cheng'an is writing, the elite and scholarly class would often write in a different style, a different language, the language of scholarship. Which isn't that far-fetched to us. We think of the Middle Ages, where the scholars were usually writing in Latin, as opposed to the common languages, which we call the vernacular. But Wu Cheng'an wrote this story, Journey to the West, in the vernacular language, celebrating the fact that it's part of his culture and the culture of the people. Not that it wasn't full of artistry. As I pointed out, there's lots and lots of poetry within the original text, and even some within Waley's abridgment. This is a great time to point this out again. The beginning of chapter 10 in the W.J.F. Jenner translation, which is the complete 100 chapters and all of the content, we can see the distinction between how Waley translates it and how Jenner does it. It begins, as Waley's does, with the woodcutter and the fisherman. The two of them have been drinking and chatting, and they're walking home. And on their way home, they get into an argument about whose job is better. They're both wannabe scholars. The book calls them lettered men of the mountains. They've both studied a whole lot, but they've never taken the examinations. And so there's this sort of funny poetry battle back and forth between the two of them. Now, Waley just says, reciting song words and linking verses as they went, they reached a place where their ways parted, and stood bowing ceremoniously to each other. In the full version, as seen in Jenner, it includes their entire conversation, starting with the fact that they both agree that they're better off doing their humble jobs than struggling for fame and fortune. But they can't decide whose job is better. And so Zheng Xiao quotes a poem to prove that being a fisherman is better than being a woodcutter. Li Ding responds with another poem to prove that being a woodcutter is better than being a fisherman. Zheng Xiao responds with another poem, Li Ding responds with another poem, Zheng Xiao responds with another poem, Li Ding responds with another poem, Zheng Xiao responds with another poem, Li Ding responds with another poem, and it goes on for page after page after page after page. After 10 pages of poetry, they both decide that they're never going to come to a conclusion in their argument, so they both decide to just alternate verses and sing about how both of their jobs are great. And they do that for 2 more pages. Until finally it says, when the two of them had recited their verses and matched couplets, they came to the place where their ways parted and bowed to each other to take their leave. So even if you just stick with Arthur Waley's translation, don't forget that this book is a fantastic balance between the common people vernacular, the folk stories of the people, and the arts and language of poetry and beauty. that were so important to the scholarly class. We've also already noted some of the other folk elements and the way they convey culture. The way heaven in this book is just a bureaucracy, and the way the underworld is just a filing room. Those reflect cultural ideas and the way some of the people viewed their government. The folk elements of the story also help us to understand these religious philosophies and the way that they influence culture. The Buddhism, Taoism, and Confucianism running all through this book. The importance of redemption. The fact that nobody's really perfect. Keep your eyes open for the folk elements, and the way the characters in this story reflect the kind of characteristics that we see in folk tales all over the world. Alright, as we said, we leave behind all the characters that we've been introduced to so far, but we're going to have another fascinating story, which deals a lot with the underworld. Let's look and see what happens, and keep listening for those folk characteristics as we go through. As I said, the fisherman Zhang Shao and the woodcutter Li Ding are having a stroll and talking about poetry and art and their occupations. As they're concluding and saying goodbye to each other, Zhang mentions how he's always had this luck with fishing lately because of this fortune teller who always tells him exactly where to fish. And so he always catches a wonderful catch. As he's saying this, he's overheard by a yaksha, one of the servants of the Dragon King of the river. And so the yaksha, overhearing this, decides to go tell the Dragon King. There is a fortune teller who is telling where all of our fish are to the fisherman so that he will catch all of us. In no time, our entire kingdom will be depopulated.
I must do something about this,
says the Dragon King. Now, dragons are another folk character from China. They're not the fire-breathing monstrosities from Western culture, but rather they are benevolent, generally, water creatures who make it rain. Dragon makes it rain. And so this dragon decides to do something for his people. He's going to go stop this fortune teller from telling where his people are anymore. And so he disguises himself as a scholar. And he goes to the house of the fortune teller.
At what hour will it rain, and how much will it fall? At the hour of the dragon, there will be the clouds will gather. At the hour of the snake, there will be a peal of thunder. At noon, the rain will fall and will continue to the hour of the sheep, leaving exactly 3.048 inches.
Okay. If you're right, I will pay you handsomely. But if you're wrong, I will come tear down your shop. The dragon returns home to his people who say, hey, you make it rain, so you just make it rain different than what the soothsayer said, and everything will be fine. But just at that time, he gets a message from heaven, and he gets an order for the exact amount of rain at the exact time that the soothsayer said it would be, from the Jade Emperor.
Oh no.
But his fish people say, hey, well, why don't you just change it just a little bit? Just, you know, a tiny alteration, enough to be able to say that the soothsayer was wrong. And so that's what the dragon does. He changes the rain just a little bit, and then he goes to the soothsayer's house, and he smashes the place.
Brrr, you were wrong! Ha 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 ha! Now I get my revenge! You'll never soothsay again!
But the soothsayer says, no, it's you that are wrong, you stupid dragon. You just disobeyed heaven. Now you're gonna be in trouble. In fact, they want your head now, dude. Oh no! The dragon is really upset. He did disobey heaven, and we see that the penalties can be pretty sharp for disobeying heaven. And now the dragon is going to have to be beheaded. And he's going to be beheaded by Wei Cheng, who is a minister to the emperor. But with one final hope, he rushes to the emperor. Who's going to play my emperor? And so the Dragon King goes to the Emperor and says, Emperor, I've been a bad dragon, and I made a mistake, and now heaven wants to decapitate me. So please stop your minister, Wei Cheng, from killing me. And the Emperor says, well, okay, sure, why not? I'll do everything I can. Thank you. And so the Emperor calls Wei Cheng and decides to play chess with him. Let's play chess. Okay. I'm gonna trounce you. And so they sit down to play chess, and they're playing, and all of a sudden, Wei Cheng gets sleepy. And falls asleep. And the Emperor says, ha! If he's asleep, he can't kill the dragon! Little does the Emperor know that Wei Cheng has magic dream powers that allow him to chop off the dragon's head in a dream! Amazing! Wei Chang then wakes up and says, "Oh, what a lovely dream. I decapitated a dragon in my dream." "Oops, I failed," says the Emperor. Later on, the ghost of the dragon comes back to haunt him. "Why didn't you save me? Oh." And then the king gets very, very sick, because every night the ghost of the dragon is haunting him. And the Emperor starts to get sick and die. On his deathbed, Wei Chang says, "Well, don't worry, I have a really close friend who is a former mentor of mine, who is dead now, and I will send a letter of recommendation to him with you into your grave, and so you can present it to him in the court of the dead, and he will help you out with this whole messy dragon business. Thanks, man." And so the Emperor dies, with his letter of recommendation in hand. Arriving in the underworld, the Emperor is greeted by Wei Chang's old mentor, Si Chao, and the Emperor presents him with the letter of recommendation, and Si Chao says, "I can help you out, no problem. Let's go talk to Yama." And so they go on down into the courts of the dead. Along the way, they bump into a couple of old brothers of the Emperor, and they manage to brush past them, but it's going to cause trouble later. The Emperor goes before Yama, who says, "Well, obviously the dragon was in the wrong, so you're fine, you can go back to life. I just need to check your records and see how much longer you're supposed to be alive. Hey, Xixiao, check his records." And so Xixiao goes to check his records and finds that the Emperor is not supposed to really continue living, but because of the nice letter of recommendation he got, and just because he's a nice guy, he goes ahead and quickly makes an adjustment, adding several years to the Emperor's lifespan. "Okay," says Yama, "looks like you've got a lot longer to live." The Emperor says, "Hey, is there anybody else I should know about who's about to die in my family?" And Yama says, "Oh, it looks like Princess Jadebud's about to die." Aw, bummer, I like her. But it's time to go back to life, and so now the Emperor and Xiqiao head back towards life. But on their way, they're stopped by a big horde of hungry ghosts. Hungry ghosts are people who have died without any family to take care of them, to pray for them, and to burn alms for them. And these are mostly like ruffians and brigands. But now, since they have no one to pray for them, they're starving. No one gives them offerings, and they're just hungry all the time. "Oh, we're hungry! Oh no, what do I do?" Xiqiao says, "Quick, just give them something that will appease them, and then we can go on past." "But I didn't bring any money with me," says the Emperor. "No worries, I know some people who are still alive, who have loads and loads and loads of cash down here. I will let you take it out on credit, and you can pay them back when you get back to life." "Okay, that'll work." And so the Emperor throws lots of cash at the ghosts, and they retreat, and he's able to go back to life. Actually, Xiqiao shoves him in the river, which pops him back to life. It's sort of a startle. It's sort of a surprise for the Emperor. He comes back to life, surrounded by his ministers, and goes, Oh, what happened? What happened? I'm alive!" And then he tells the story of everything that happened to him. But he still has some debts to pay. He actually owes Yama some melons, or pumpkins, depending on your translation. I like melons. And because he borrowed a whole bunch of cash in the underworld, he needs to both do a giant mass for the dead to pray for all the hungry ghost souls, and pay back the people whose money he borrowed in the underworld. Paying them back seems like it'll be an easy thing, because after all, they're still alive, so he walks to their house with a big bunch of cash. It turns out that they're very poor, but they're very pious, and so because of their piety, they've earned lots of money in the afterlife. They don't want a bunch of money. And so instead of giving it to them because they don't want it, he builds a beautiful temple in their honor, and then he's going to be able to say the Mass for the Dead at the temple. He also decides he needs to send the melons to Yama, Lord of the Dead. But the only problem is, how do you get melons to the land of the dead? Well, you gotta kill somebody. And so he looks far and wide for someone who he can kill to send some melons to Yama. And he does find a volunteer, actually. He finds a man whose wife committed suicide, and he's so heartbroken over it that he also wants to die. And so he gives the man a melon to carry down to the land of the dead. Die! Melons! Upon arrival, Yama is very appreciative of the melons. I love melons! Me too, Yama. Me too. In fact, Yama is so happy that he decides to give the man back his life. Not only that, but here's his wife! And the two of them are so happy to be reunited, and all of their past wrongs are forgotten, and so they want to be happily married again. There's a problem, though. His wife's body is a little overdone in the dead department. And so Yama says, well, is there anybody else about to die that we can put her soul into? Oh yes, there's Princess Jadebud! Well, we'll just put the woman's soul in Princess Jadebud's body as soon as she dies. And so Princess Jadebud is going along, and all of a sudden, she dies. And then, whoosh, she pops back up. With a new soul inside! The Emperor hears that Princess Jadebud has died. Oh, but then he also hears that she's popped back up alive, and he says, oh, that's weird. But she's acting really weird, saying, wait, where's my husband? Where's my husband? Hang on. Are you Princess Jadebud? No, I'm not Princess Jadebud. I'm Blue Lotus. I'm Louis Chen's wife. Oh yeah, no, I get it. No, I got it. Okay, well, we'll just marry Princess Jadebud / Blue Lotus to Louis Chen, which makes sense since they're already technically married, and we'll just pretend like, we'll just give him a dowry as if he were, you know, a royal son-in-law. So, Blue Lotus goes and back to her husband, and they live happily ever after, we assume. And now it's time to perform the Mass for the Dead, to pray for all those souls of the hungry ghosts. And the Emperor says, where in China is the best monk ever? And so they do a big search for all the best monks. In fact, they get the best of the best monks and they gather them together, and then they let them choose among their own number the best of the best of the best monks. And you know who comes out on top? It's Sansang! We're finally making some connections. Our good old buddy Sansang, who saved his parents in Chapter 10, remember him? Yep, he's the best monk in China, and he's about to do this mass. Then in comes Kuan Yin, and she has a couple of special items. She has a magic brocaded cassock, or the priest garment. And she also has a 9-ringed priest staff. Although she doesn't reveal her identity, word gets around that there's this woman with these super awesome items that would be perfect for the speaker of the Mass. And so the Emperor asks that they be given to Sansang. The time comes for him to give the Mass, and he's up there in his super awesome outfit, and in the middle of his speech, Kuan Yin says, hey, why don't you give us some of the big vehicle scriptures? And Sansang is taken aback. He's not heard of these. All he knows is the little vehicle. And everyone's upset at the interruption in the Mass, except for Sansang, because he's excited about these new scriptures that he's heard of. And so he walks down to Kuan Yin and says, please tell me more about them. And Kuan Yin tells them about the Tripitaka, the 3 baskets of great vehicle scriptures over in India. And if someone would go get them, they would be able to save the souls of China. And then Kuan Yin reveals herself and floats up into the sky, in spite of the Emperor wanting her to be the one to lead the Mass now. And so the Emperor says, we need someone to go get these scriptures for us. Sansang, you're the man for the job. And so Sansang has his cassock and he has his priest staff and he's ready to set out and go. And it's going to be a long, hard journey, but he's going to do it. And the Emperor changes his name to Tripitaka from Sansang, named after the scriptures that he's seeking. And as he's leaving, the Emperor offers him a cup of wine, which Tripitaka says, no, I shouldn't take that. But the Emperor says, no, I insist. I'm the Emperor, you take this wine. And just as Tripitaka is about to drink, the Emperor tosses some dirt in it. Yay, dirt in my food. But it's so that he can ingest part of his homeland and carry it with him as he goes. That's sentimental. How's the journey gonna go? It's gonna be a long, hard journey to the west, which will involve lots of exciting adventures, and we will pick it back up in the next episode. I'll see you then. Bye-bye.